engineering in Richmond. So, this is our inaugural event. Thank you guys for coming. I know some of you have come far distances. Not for the event, but I like to think so.
West End.
So, oh yeah, West End, yeah. So, I'm Sam. I'm the guy who was supposed to see on the meetup when you joined the group. I work at Precision Solutions. We're a data science company. And I like to think of myself as a data engineer, but I guess more realistically, I solve practical problems using Python and moving data from one place to another, and solving folks' problems out there. Yeah.
I'm Julia. I'm one of the other 4 organizers for the group. I'm currently managing a data engineering team at CarMax, so my whole world is data engineering, and I love it. And we came together and we felt like there was a little bit of a gap between all the data science groups and some of the data management and some of the other technologies, a space where we can really talk about our particular practice. So welcome to the event, and we're just going to do about 5 minutes introduction to who we are. So these, David, Sam, me, and Brandon are sort of the 4 organizers, but we are a community, so we would like your feedback regarding topics, the way the meeting's going and so forth. This is really more about you than us, so we really want to empower you to talk about data engineering, and either you're stepping into data engineering and this is your first time really hearing about it and you want to know more about it, or you're a seasoned practitioner and really looking to maybe network with folks who are also seasoned to answer some particular questions and things like that. So we hope that this group will encompass all of those needs and that we can have some fun together. And basically, we're going to primarily focus on data engineering, but as everyone here who does practice it know, it may fuse into other fields like software engineering and DevOps and a bit of data science here and there and so forth. But generally, we're going to try to stick with the data engineering practice. And most importantly, just have fun. We're going to try to do this group once a month, maybe once every 2 months, depending on kind of demand. So we just want to get together and have some pizza, have some fun, and geek out. So the way you can sort of communicate with us and other members of this community is through obviously through our meetup app, through our Slack channel, and through GitHub, where we hopefully will also be able to post code and things like that regarding to the content of this meetup.
We'll provide the slides after this, so you guys don't need to.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, we're also on LinkedIn and other things like that, so feel free to contact us at any time. And want to just give a big shout out first to IPON for hosting this event. This is an amazing space. They have a whole area for food and everything like that. And also thank you very much to both Precision and CarMax. They sponsored the food and the beer and drinks tonight, so thank you. And then, so to our tonight's amazing speakers. First, we're going to have Rivero, who's actually the Chief Data Officer of the Commonwealth of Virginia. And then we're going to have Todd Dube, who's an architect at CarMax. And just to put on your calendars, we are hoping to do our next meetup on Wednesday, January 15th. That's tentative right now, but just so you know, we're going to try to kind of skip the holidays. Maybe we'll do a little bit of we were thinking about like a little cocktail hour or something like that.
Social.
Exactly, but other than that, the next meetup with real presentations and content, we're aiming for the 15th of January. So with that, I will hand it over to Carlos.
Thank you guys for having me. I greatly appreciate the opportunity to speak with you. Okay, well, they're setting things up. Awesome. So, first off, how do you piss off a data scientist?
Say depends.
Throw something out there. How do you piss them off?
Change the data that they thought was one thing to another.
Well, you make them a data engineer. That's the one thing they don't want to deal with, is all the transformation of data and the movement of data. They just want to get a nice, clean data set that they can do everything they want, create all the insights in the world, and not give you any credit. The reality is that you guys play a huge role in being able to do the data analytics and across our organization. So it's all managing the movement of data throughout the organization. And a big part of that is data governance, right? A big part of being able to facilitate the work that you do is having appropriate data governance on the front end to facilitate the work that your dad is doing in the middle, but then ultimately facilitates the analytics, machine learning, the data science, but ultimately the intelligence that's derived from those solutions. But going beyond that, why are we doing this? I was kind of standing in the slides, so let me stand away from it. There are three main reasons why we implement the solutions, and I talk about data governance a lot because it's something that within the Commonwealth specifically, we're not paying a whole lot of attention to, right? We're doing data management, we're doing data security, we're trying to do some data analytics here and there, but we're not really paying attention to data governance, which is kind of the front loading of all of those different types of activities that we're trying to accomplish. But why are we doing this? So number one, improving operational efficiency across all the different Commonwealth organizations, right? Being able to leverage the data assets that we already have, so we're not creating a lot of duplicate effort across these different organizations. But more than that, create citizen-centered services, or create more citizen-centered services. Being able to create portals that citizens can log into and get access to multiple government services at one time without having to re-enter their information over and over and over again and getting different results every time they do. But then at the end of the day, it's about creating better outcomes for our constituents. What exactly are those outcomes, right? Specifically, we're talking about reducing the number of overdose deaths related to substance use and opioids, increasing the number of students that are ready for school and early childhood development, decreasing recidivism, right? Looking at these big picture complex issues that we're trying to deal with, but in a very direct and focused way. And that's where you play a huge role in being able to transform the data assets that are being collected by the variety of different organizations across the Commonwealth, massaging them and transforming them into something that we can use to generate the insights that we need to do that, right? To improve the operational efficiency, to create more citizen-centered services, and to create better outcomes for our constituents overall. But how am I tackling this specifically? Right? Within the Commonwealth, I have 4 primary initiatives that I'm focused on. Those are first and foremost data governance. I have a data sharing and analytics advisory committee that has 2 senators and 4 cabinet secretaries that sit on that committee, that we have discussions about what is the appropriate level of data governance that we want to recommend to the governor and the General Assembly for us to be able to implement to facilitate those outcomes that we talked about earlier in the previous slide. So in addition to that, creating an enterprise data catalog, right? The first thing I did when I came into this position is, well, where's my data inventory? What data assets do I have? We don't have them. Okay, so how do you call it an asset if you've never inventoried it, right? That's a big deal, right? We inventory all kinds of stupid things, waste baskets, urinals, all kinds of stuff is in an inventory from a facilities management perspective. Why not our data, right? And so the reason is, number one, it's hard, and number two, nobody wants to do it. Data documentation is a great thing to do for someone else to do, nothing. And so that's part of the thing that we really need to get over that hurdle and be able to really truly get into data documentation, but more than that, data curation, to truly understand and value what our data assets are. But in addition to that, be able to create a consolidated platform for data sharing and analytics across the Commonwealth. That doesn't mean that we're only using one technology to do it, but we're creating a consistent process, a consistent methodology of how we share data across the Commonwealth. Right now, it's point to point, where an agency is a data source provider, and they're providing data assets to 4, 5, 6 different agencies to provide, value added for their particular operations, because they're doing it ad hoc. Every time they come into a data sharing agreement, it's almost like they have amnesia and they completely forgot about the last data sharing agreement they created, so they're going to create a whole new one from scratch. Right? And then therein lies a legal tussle between everybody's attorneys figuring out what constitutes a legal agreement for data sharing and are we violating any federal privacy laws. Right? We're going through that whole process, and we got hundreds of data sharing agreements within the different agencies, and we're talking at least 64 different executive branch agencies. So let's start to do the math. It adds up pretty quick. Right? So creating one platform and one concept for sharing data across the Commonwealth is another thing that I'm working on. But lastly, cultivating that data talent. Right? How do we cultivate data talent within the Commonwealth where our educational system is not specifically focused on those critical thinking and analytical skills that we need to be data analysts, data scientists, data engineers? Right? How do we cultivate that talent? Well, what I've done is married up my need for an enterprise data catalog and data documentation with our need for data talent development, and set up a rural IT apprenticeship program that allows me to tap into apprentices across the rural communities in the southern and southwest areas of Virginia to be able to do data documentation work for me. So I'll talk a little bit about that in the coming slide. But in addition to the apprenticeship program, we also have the Commonwealth Data Internship Program, where we engage students from across the Commonwealth and their research faculty professors on data projects for agencies and localities as well. So one of the things that I'm reaching out to my localities and my municipalities and our counties, what are some of your most pressing problems that you don't have resources to deal with? And then I marry them. It's almost like eHarmony for data analytics, right? I go back and I work with my research faculty in the academic institution to say, what talent, what resources, what skill sets do you guys have that can play to this and bring those folks together to provide not just the students with professional skills and professional experience, but also the localities and the agencies with the help that they need in solving some complex issues. So being able to bring those two groups together. So you can see that from the 4 initiatives, not one is in isolation of the other. We could essentially do one in isolation, but it wouldn't have the same effect, right? We want to be able to leverage all 4 of those initiatives to create that virtuous cycle of continuous improvement, if you will, as we develop this out. So going right into the data governance framework. Talking with my advisory committee, we come to realize that the legislators really want to have a handle on what the outcomes are. And I'm hoping that this thing has a laser, maybe. Yeah, it does. All right. So what the outcomes are that are derived from the operations. What's happening right now is our General Assembly is creating changes in the laws and the funding, and then expecting certain outcomes to happen. And then they get upset when those outcomes aren't achieved, because there's no visibility between here and here. They're not communicating effectively, even though we wish they would, but the reality is that they don't, because our legislators do not have supervisory authority over our operators. And that's the key, is being able to separate our operations from our legislation and create a middle layer which allows us to communicate a third neutral party, if you will, between the two. Where on this data commission, not only do I have myself and representatives from each of the data operations groups, and these are the different groups, so we have a variety of executive branch agencies, but also legislative and judicial. There are partners there too. There are organizations within the legislative and judicial branches that do data ops, right, on a regular basis. And they do data analytics, and they want to engage in data science as well. And so being able to incorporate them into the larger conversation is absolutely critical. Obviously, we need our representation from the Attorney General, because we always want to make sure that we're up above bar on all the legal issues that we have to deal with, and there are many. Right? But we also want representatives from the legislation, from the General Assembly, 4 delegates and 4 senators, to be our advocates in the General Assembly. Right? We need to have that kind of representation, not just from them to us, but from us to them. Right? Be able to spread the word in a way that allows them to understand and make sense of what it is we're trying to accomplish from a data perspective. But in addition to that, we also have regional representation from one of 7 different geographic regions across the state. And within those regional representatives, those 7, we want to have at least a minimum of 1 from academia, 1 from a locality, and 1 from a technology council. We want to make sure that we have each of those perspectives represented as we're having discussions amongst the Data Commission on what some of our Commonwealth goals and objectives should be. And I'll give you an example of one in a second. Before jumping into that, we also have identified some advisory committees that can participate in the Data Commission, like a technical advisory committee, the Virginia Geographic and Information Network for all things spatial, also data ethics, security, and privacy committees, extremely important, not just from an informational role at the Data Commission, but an advisory role on our data operations to make sure that we are thinking about some of these larger contextual issues and not just jumping into data analytics because we have the data. Right? We want to be able to think about those hard questions as we're rolling out some of these projects. But in addition to that, one of the things that I recently had the opportunity to engage with our folks in records management and government archives, they also want to provide a committee that helps support the Data Commission from a records management perspective, which is extremely critical because records management was data management before we had data, right? And so being able to incorporate their thoughts and ideas into this larger context is extremely important. But the idea here is that the Data Commission identifies a goal that the Commonwealth wants to get. Like, for example, 10% reduction in overdose deaths. Okay? That's a pretty simple thing to think about, and it's a simple thing to measure. All we need is the data from the medical examiner's office to tell us how many deaths do we have due to overdoses, and did we decrease or increase from last year? Pretty simple. But the medical examiner cannot move the needle on whether or not that goes up or down. They're just reporting the fact, right? And so there are multiple agencies that are engaged in that process, from criminal justice services to corrections to medical assistance services to Department of Health, juvenile justice. Name the alphabet, it's in there, right? There's a variety of different agencies and localities. Some localities are more impacted by this issue than others. So being able to engage those as well in the overall solution is incredibly important. And so in order for us to do that, the General Assembly would then need to say, okay, that is a worthwhile goal. I like the objectives. Let's identify who needs to participate in this. So within the General Assembly, they then create the code, the law, that says you, agency X, Y, Z, and localities, whatever, need to participate on this project, and we will provide X amount of funding. And as part of that, that supports the operations folks that then execute on that mission, right? And then they are then able to report back to the Data Commission what they were able to achieve, and what were some of the stumbling blocks, and what some of the things that needed to happen. Now I'm going to give an example of that in the next slide. When we talk about within data operations, what does governance look like within our operations environment, right? We have an executive data board, we have a data governance council, and we have a data stewards group. And in the middle of all that, we have our data governance and analytics program office, which is my office, team of one right now, but hopefully will grow soon. But in any case, what happens is that the executive data board consists of executive leadership from those agencies identified in the legislation that says you shall now work on this project. You now participate in the executive data board, and then your responsibility as the executive leader of that agency is to translate that 10% reduction in overdose deaths to something your agency can actually do, right? So a performance target that your agency is now responsible for to helping meet that 10% reduction in overdose deaths. And then ultimately, you hand that over to your data governance council member who happens to be a senior level manager or director within your organization that understands how the data supports the mission and has the authority to pull on a data steward to say, make this data asset available to the program office to start working on our analytics, right? So it's not just, let me see what data assets I have, it's I have the authority to make them available, right? So in addition to that, you as a data governance council member are now responsible for governing the data trust. And I'll get into the data trust in a minute. But one of the things that we found is that a lot of agencies kind of are hindered, well not kind of, they are hindered by previous code legislation that says you cannot share this kind of data. A perfect example is that is emergency medical services data, right? So when we're talking about the path for an overdose incident, you're talking about someone making a phone call to 911, that's computer-aided dispatch data. Then EMS picks them up, they take them to the emergency department, and then the emergency department discharges them somewhere. So those are 4 data streams that we need to work on. The problem is that the EMS data, they don't want to share it. Right? The Department of Health doesn't want to share it because they're under the impression that they're not allowed by code to share it. So when something like that happens, that's when we go right back to the Data Commission and say, you know what, we would have been able to do that project, but we're not able to get access to the EMS data. So how are we able to identify where the hot zones are in the naloxone implementations or administrations? Where does that happen? We can't tell, right? So without that EMS data, we can't do anything about it. The recommendation goes to legislature, you need to change that code. That code needs to be written another way that allows this organization to share that data for this purpose. And therein lies the feedback loop, right? So when we identify stumbling blocks, whether they're organizational, political, or legislative legal hurdles, we have a vehicle for identifying them and dealing with them now. Because now it's not just a matter of, well, I can't do anything about it, forget it, I'm not going to bother with it anymore. Now we have a vehicle for communicating that to our legislator, who is very interested in the outcome to say, okay, you want to move the needle on this? Then you need to change that. And that way facilitates that conversation, right? So these are the 7 regions. Now, I did not make these up myself. As good government employee, I plagiarized and grab these from other organizations. So, Department of Emergency Management uses them, State Police uses them, but also Virginia Geographic Information Network uses this as well. Department of Education also uses this, but they are special, and so they decided, especially in this particular area, that Giles County was no longer part of Region 4. Actually, they named this Region 7 instead of Region 4. They got rid of Giles and they included Floyd. So, I was like, really? Why, right? Like, okay. But anyway, we're all special. Let's just take it from there. But within that governance framework is looking at the organizational hierarchy, right? Are we representative of everyone within the organization, from the operational all the way to the executive? And yes, we are, right? We're looking at operational, tactical, strategic level, all the different members involved in each one. Obviously, the tactical level is extremely important because that's where most often projects fail, right? Initiatives, whatever you want to call it, this is where it fails more often than not at the tactical level. Because strategically and executively, we understand These are good things to do. We should be able to do it operationally. We're all suffering down here. We know these are great things to do. Tactical or like middle management. I don't know. This doesn't make sense to me. Why am I doing this? No, security violation can't be done, right? Because these are the folks that are most constrained. When you think about our middle level management within the organizational structure, these are the folks that deal with procurement laws. These are the folks that deal with HR laws. These are the folks that are usually the ones against the wall and having to deal with compliance on all these different regulations and policies, right? Operational level, we're really insulated from this because we're just in the closet doing our work. Strategic level, they don't know anything anyway, so it's just like, yeah, whatever. These guys are the ones that are just kind of like, oh man, I'm the one that's going to get dinged if this thing doesn't run through. And that's where a lot of these issues fall apart. So making sure that we have their involvement in the data governance framework is extremely critical because they need to be engaged. This is an example of how this particular framework works from a data operations perspective for the opioid project that I kicked off in Winchester last year, in August of last year, and we just wrapped it up in April and we've expanded it to Roanoke now. And so this is kind of a self-organizing principle for all these different types of projects. You guys have probably already seen it multiple times where you have to have executive buy-in, right, and support for the project that you're doing to not only identify your performance targets, but also remove obstacles and allocate resources, right? Make that stuff available. Your middle layer management to be able to provide the cover to make sure that you're able to do the work you need to do down here and in the middle here. So it's almost a self-organizing principle, but it's formalizing that process so that a different organization, different projects that are doing the same type of work don't have to figure it out on their own. We can just provide them the framework, the infrastructure, and the capability to do it, and you can go run off and be productive, right? So that's what this is all about. The same structure, we have it for food insecurity, we have it for roadway safety. There's a variety of different high-level complex projects that we're dealing with that engage multidisciplinary operators that fall into the same type of structure. The data trust. This to me is the most exciting part of what we're doing because instead of doing this point-to-point sharing where an agency is having 5 different transfer vehicles of data for 5 different organizations, they're all entrusting my office with the data assets that they want to make available. I am then responsible and accountable for implementing security controls and complying with their data sharing addendum, with their agreements as who should get access to what. So it's up to me to make sure, me and my office, not just me, but my office, to be able to make sure that only those individuals that have been identified get access to the data, right? So we have 3 data trusts right now operating within the Commonwealth. The first one is the VLDS, the Virginia Longitudinal Data System. And believe it or not, this thing has been in operation for over 8 years. Right? It's an amazing feat that they've been able to accomplish completely under the radar. Nobody really knows about it. It's just kind of like, what? VL who? Only those people that actually have been working with this data know what the system is. But the reality is that system is almost a precursor to all the stuff that I've been doing for the past 15 months. Right? The FACT Data Trust has data from a variety of different organizations. And one of the things that we did with FACT stands for the Framework for Addiction Analysis and Community Transformation. It was originally called the Opioid Pilot Project. That wasn't very sexy, so we made it FACT, right? And so, but essentially it's really looking at addiction analysis in general, not just specifically to opioids, but also focus on community transformation. Looking at how communities are not only impacted, but can solve the problem. This problem, substance use disorder issue, is not a federal problem, it's not a state problem, it's a community problem. And it's going to be solved by the communities, but with state and federal help, right? And so being able to engage those organizations within those communities to facilitate the consolidation of all their data assets and the analytics and the intelligence required to allow them to make better decisions is really what this project is all about. It's not that we're coming in and saying, we're from the government, we're going to help, we'll know everything, shut up, sit down. It's, what do you guys need? What are you trying to work on? What are the most pressing problems? How can we solve them? And 2 of the ingredients that are critical for our success is organizational maturity. There should be enough respect and trust amongst the member parties to want to share their data with each other, but also digital readiness. Is your data in a format that allows us to easily ingest it into our environment, and we can then document it for you because no one documents their data. We've already covered that, and we can then incorporate that into our consolidated data platform. So this is just an example of some of the organizations that are providing data into that trust, and this is the same thing for workforce data trust. So now we've implemented the same concept, but now for workforce. We're providing that more citizen-centered services where a citizen can just log on to one portal and have access to all of these different services, from the Employment Commission to the economic development, to the Department of Labor, community college system, veteran services, you name it, it's in here, right? And it's being able to provide those services in a one-stop shop format to a citizen. When a citizen logs into that portal and they're looking for a workforce support or a service, right? They don't exactly know what service they need. All they know is they either need training, they need a job, they need money, right? They need something, right? The problem is that when they go to the service center, the person that they speak to may only hear what that person just said. I need training. Okay, we'll go to the training supervisor. But they might also need a slew of other services that they weren't even aware existed. And so because that person automatically shifted them over to the training, they're not aware of all the different other services that are available. So what we've done is we've incorporated all the data from these different organizations, created that portal, and said now, presented the user with, these are the options that you have. What are you looking for? These are all the services that we provide. What interests you? And as soon as you click on all those services, you submit that, and that automatically creates not just an account in their system, but it also notifies one of their representatives to contact you. So instead of you finding out who that person is in one of 12 different agencies and going to those individuals, now they're responsible for contacting you and reaching out to you to engage you on what service you need. And we're monitoring those metrics to determine how long does it take for them to contact you and what is the outcome of that contact. Right? So following through and figuring out what the outcomes are extremely important in this context. Excuse me. This is the old crap slide, right? So this is like, how does it all actually work, right? How does all these different pieces come together? Well, operationally, all of our different systems run behind these firewalls, and we don't have access to the transaction system, nor do I want to, right? These all serve a very specific purpose, and I don't want to have any touch point with these systems whatsoever. However, I do want to catalog what's in these systems so I can be able to develop out my enterprise data catalog and be able to get an idea of what data assets do we actually have. And that's where the data stewards play a huge role. They administer these different data systems, can connect to the enterprise data catalog, which in this case is the Azure data catalog, to register those data assets, those tables and views that are the most important, that are the most high profile, high value, the ones that, the money tables, if you will, right? I don't want to know about all your system tables. I don't want to know about all your lookup tables. I want to know about the tables that actually connect, that contain the facts and dimensions that I'm going to use later on, right? The ones that everybody wants to have access to. That's what I want. If I go through and scan all your different systems and pull out everything, guess what? I'm going to overwhelm my team and we're never going to be able to get this done, right? So I really want to focus and prioritize what data assets we register. But in addition to that, I also want to be able to register data assets from these data hubs that we're implementing. So each one of these data hubs have a very specific purpose. For example, this one is supporting the FACT project, which is the substance use pilot project originally. This one is supporting that workforce referral portal. This one is supporting VDOT innovation. And this one is supporting DBHCS, the Department of Behavioral Health and Developmental Services Data Warehouse. Right? So these are all purpose-built, supporting a very specific business mission. Right? But at the same time, we're going to wrap them in API standards and identity access management standards and build them into our semantic data layer so that we can leverage them for data sharing across the board. Right? So even though they were purpose-built for a specific reason, we're going to leverage them for the greater context of being able to provide all these different user groups and many more. Right? This is not exhaustive. This is just representative to have access to our data assets. But how does that actually work? So when we register those data assets into the catalog, the student apprentices do the documentation and curation work. Then they submit it back to the data stewards for their approval. Within ADC, they're able to tag it as approved. Okay, this is good. The documentation is solid. That doesn't mean it's shared. It's just approved internally. This is our internal catalog. When they tag it as published, it gets harvested now into our public curated catalog that now everyone can see our metadata. Right? Yay, metadata. Right? I know it's a dirty word in some circles, but not mine. Right? So, it's essentially being able to expose all of our data assets. What do we actually have? The fact that we have classified data doesn't make it classified, right? You should know we have classified data. It exists, it's there. Now, do you have access to it? No. But you know it exists, right? So it's not like, the black helicopter people are going to come and say, hey, you're exposing my stuff. No, we're not, right? We're just telling people that we have the stuff. We're not telling you what is actually in it. But essentially what you're doing is you're allowing people to come in, peruse our catalog, and then submit a formal request. Right now, that's for data that's not open. Open data is a whole other issue that we're porting out to the Library of Virginia, and everyone can have access to it there. right? Because open data is great, and we want to support it, but open data is a subset of data sharing, not the end-all be-all, right? And so being able to create this platform that allows people to log in, create an account, identify what their purpose is, why are they asking for this data to begin with, and they don't have to know where is it coming from, because they already have a menu that's telling them these are all the data assets that we have, pick and choose whatever you want. Then to hit submit. When you hit submit, it automatically gets routed to the right people. You don't need to know who they are. You'll eventually learn who they are, because you'll get emails and stuff from them like, why are you asking for this data? But anyway, it's an automated process, right? So it essentially facilitates that communication between who wants data and who has data, right? And so in so doing, once they approve your request, that automatically creates a security control in my environment that allows you to get access to it, right? So it's all automated. So it's not something that I then get a piece of paper and then I have to go find someone and then I got to tell my administrator. No, it's all automated because it's all part of the overall workflow. And as we onboard these data assets into this environment, we're then linking all of it together to make sure that when you ask for an individual, because this is all de-identified record level data, right? So you have data about individuals, it's not about the individual itself, right? So you'll know that the information that you got from this particular record, whether it's DSS, DMS, and all these other alphabet soup agencies, that's all for the same individual. That's the value add that we provide. So when you get that data back, you know that that's all linked together. And this is my website. So if you want to know anything more about what's going on and what's happening, I have to apologize. I have a team of one, so I don't have a whole lot of time to do a lot of this stuff. But in initiatives right now, it's completely blank. But you already know about them because I talked to you about them, so we're good. But you can learn more about it. And I am having a road show where I've been going across all those different regions, talking to folks about what we're doing. It's a 73-slide deck that takes about 2 to 3 hours to do, but it's a discussion and it's been very, very helpful, especially as they engage localities and what is the Commonwealth up to and how are we engaging, what it is we want to do. So I encourage you guys to take a look at it. That slide deck is under the events tab. You can download it in PDF format, and you can also download the report that we submitted to the Governor General Assembly about the data governance framework itself under the advisory committee. And I think that's it for me. Yes, the rest is just information stuff. Any questions? Yes?
Curious, what was your background before this?
Oh, I was a chef. No, I'm joking. So before this position, I was the Chief Data Officer and Chief Enterprise Architect for U.S. Federal Transit Administration. So I did that for 2 years, and then before that, I was a physical scientist really doing scientific computing for NOAA Fisheries for 15 years. So I was 12 years in Miami, in the Miami lab, and then 3 years at the Beaufort lab, doing some of the same stuff, but with different data sets.
Makes sense, thanks.
Yeah, I got a lot of scars and stuff, so totally with you guys. I understand exactly what you've been going through. Yes?
What do you do about people who have kind of crappy data and they want to hey, here's my data, I didn't curate it at all, I'm just going to shove it in your...
Well, so first off, so the metadata plays a huge role, right? So being able to go through your metadata asset and identify, okay, do you have a data dictionary? Okay, first off, more likely no. Second off, do you have a data steward, subject matter expert that I can engage with to fill out that data dictionary and put that into the data catalog? So we need to have an awareness of what data is actually in there. Now the quality of the data is suspect, okay, fine. But then what are the business processes that are used to generate that data, right? Because we need to have an understanding of that too. Because if we don't, then how does the real world get represented in your digital environment without that business process, right? And then once we have that data, well, if it's not up to par, then it's not going to be used, right? But we can start working with you to clean it up and start to identify. So that's that feedback loop. And I don't have that slide in here, but I do have a slide that talks about specifically that issue, where we get data from the operational folks, we integrate it to support tactical use. We give it to our research partners to do some algorithm development and research and development in data analytics and algorithms and machine learning, and then we operationalize it. But then when we identify knowledge gaps, data quality issues, that feeds right back into governance to say, okay, what policies, well, first off, were there any policies that you did not adhere to that would have helped you if you complied, right? Chances are there weren't any policies, so then what policies do we create? Whether it's a policy, standard, or best practice. So those are the 3 levers that we get to pull in to figure out how do we help agencies address some of their data quality issues. Now, a lot of agencies, when I come knocking on the door, the first thing they thought is, oh my God, he's going to implement data standards. And how am I going to implement a data standard? My system is 20 years old, and no, we're not implementing data standards right off the bat because we have over 1,400 operational data systems across my 64 executive branch agencies. How am I going to ever implement a data standard around that? That's just impossible. But as we identify those data assets that are high value, we put them on a data hub, then we start wrapping the standards around that. And then we start looking at quality within that context and be able to be more precise about the data sets that we want to start targeting for those quality assessments. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, that's great. Can I ask another one? Like a
Sure,
follow-up?
yeah.
It's sort of like in the versioning, like say, I don't know, the police in the western part of Virginia upgrade some system, and so they have like different, their data is different. It's expanded, maybe they drop some fields, but I'm a consumer that wants to pull from both the western and the eastern part of Virginia. So how do you deal with that versioning?
We map them to NEEM standards first and foremost, so we create that common baseline to make sure that what they call one thing, everyone is calling the same thing, even though they're calling it different things individually, but we can all map them to the same context. So that's number one, making sure that we have that mapping. But then, I mean, really what can you do if they've added new fields that other folks haven't added, right? You're just gonna have to, deal with it. I mean, it's just, until those organizations upgrade or improve their operations. But what we can do though is increase visibility and say, hey, these new fields have been added, why haven't you guys added those fields? Why aren't those present in your feed into the larger system?
So do you have anything for like the consumer that like, okay, I'm getting this data and this data is only good for the western part of Virginia, not the eastern part because of reasons? Like is that, is that something that the
That should be in the metadata. Yes, that should be in the catalog. Yeah, that would be in the catalog under the types of use and the use constraints that you would have. But yeah, that's all documented in the catalog, so you would know what the differences are. Yes, sir.
So you mentioned one of the problems was a lack of talent through like data competency. But there's also the problems you mentioned about getting the legislators and the administrators and the middle tactical level on board. What's the percentage of the problem? Like, is it they don't have enough people, or is it they don't have enough people that understand what we're trying to do?
Well, I mean, that's both, right? So we definitely don't have, and I think it goes more than just data analytics proficiency. It's just data literacy and proficiency in general, right? Right, Peter? So it's just looking at how can we create a more data-aware culture that ultimately feeds that entire value chain up, right? So it's not just that our tacticians and our strategists don't understand the value of data. What they do is that they don't have the full understanding of what it takes, that full technology stack, to be able to really implement a data analytics project. Goes all the way from governance straight up into insight and intelligence, right? It's a lot. I did nothing. I have not touched anything.
But I guess to put a fun form in, is it harder to get somebody to give you that data that they said is violating code from the
Yeah, absolutely.
Or is it harder to process it once you get it?
No. It's harder to get it out of their hands, right? It's like cold, dead, right? They won't let it go unless they have 100% cover that they're allowed to let it go.
So and you mentioned the feedback loop, so what's being done kind of maybe from staffing or from education to make that part easier?
Well, I mean, the framework is first off, right? It's bringing all the right people together to make the right decision at the right time, right? And making sure that everyone understands what it is that we're trying to actually do. And then that trickles down to the organization. And you saw all the different levels of the organization that are impacted. So it's not just a project-based initiative. This is a program. This is something that will never end. Data documentation is a program. It's not a project. Data inventory is a program, not a project. Never end, right? Because every time we modernize our system, hey, new data we need to document, new thing we need to put into the system, right? So every time we create a new consolidation platform, new data needs to be documented. So it's creating that mindset that this is not just a very finite, time-limited, time-box event. This is something that's ongoing, that is part of your work process from this point forward. And I think I'm going to limit it one more because I know I have someone behind me, so.
Excellent talk. I'm totally new for the data science community. This is my first time joining this event. So I want to pursue some degree of the data science. Do you have some suggestions?
Yeah, talk to Peter. Thank you guys, I really appreciate your time. Feel free
freely available on the website.
Yes, they are.
So,
It's actually not your laptop.
now it's technically not my laptop. So I have enough slides. I think we're supposed to wrap up at 7, but I want to cover this stuff. So this is quickly about me. 2 years at CarMax. I'm an architect. I've played various roles for 20 plus years, doing various things. I always like telling people just something about me that most people don't know. I think my boss, who's here, knows this. I was a baseball umpire for Little League in high school for 4 years. It's a glorious job, but it's a job paid well. The other bad thing about me, I'm a Detroit Lions fan. 55, so we had it last year at Glory, so I really appreciate that. One of the things I'm pretty passionate about, and the folks that know me here about that, is how do you learn? I learn in podcasts. I learn from challenging myself. I'm an older person or gentleman, so how do I challenge myself? Is find something new, technology, read up on it enough that I can understand POCs, prove it out so that I know enough to understand it, to talk about it, and ask for exploration. And don't be afraid to fail or make a mistake. Folks, I know we are going to chuckle as well. I make mistakes. I make some pretty good ones too. Connect with me on LinkedIn. Happy to talk to you. Whatnot. So. Level set, what is a data engineer? So Carl did a really good job explaining all this stuff. He also validated that we don't have all the BI tools at CarMax yet. So that's pretty cool. The other thing we validated too is just some technology selections we made. Pretty interesting to kind of see where other agencies are or companies are at on the technology selections they made. First thing we level set on a data engineer. This is my my view of what a data engineer is. It can change, argue with me. I thought about putting a white table here that says, hey, this is what a data engineer is. Change my mind. Data engineer has the following abilities and traits. The ability to learn and optimize data. They need to understand what the data they're looking at, how to manipulate that data, optimize it, work with it the best way they can. Need to be able to aggregate, label, and summarize. Carlos talked about cataloging your metadata and your data. You have to do that. That's just something that you got to do. It's not time boxes, as he said. You have to continuously do that as you bring in new data sources or you're working with data sources. Ensure they're cataloged, ensure they're usable. You're able to summarize that data so you can understand. So you have to partner with your business folks, your data scientists, your other folks, and understand, okay, so what data do you have to be looking at? Why are you looking at it? What are you trying to do with it? Be able to explore and transform that data. And also a big focus on data availability. How can they ingest that data at different velocities, and how can they deliver that data? Make it available at different velocities. Not everything has to be real-time streaming and Kafka. That's cool. But not every use case really needs that. You'll talk to your data scientist, they'll find, yeah, you know what, an hour, that's okay. They're good with that. So you have to be able to understand and focus on the data availability as you're working on the data. Need to be able to scale up quickly new technology. You gotta be able to learn. You gotta be able to look at new skill sets. You gotta be able to look at new languages or adapt to other packages that are available, whether it's SciPy, the library, Scala, all different things. You have to be able to adapt and be able to do this. You want to focus on one language, that's great. But as a data engineer, you got to have a tool belt of multiple things that you can use. Need to be able to POCs and collaborate with teams. It's another big thing I'm pretty passionate about. POC it. If you think it's going to work, POC it. You know, can you figure out the security right? Is the access right? Does it do what you want it to do? Also be able to collaborate with your team, your other team members. We're pretty big about that on our team. Is just collaborate. Just check with them. Have peer program with somebody and figure out is this the right thing to do, or you know how do you troubleshoot your problem or work through your problem. Collaborate. A big quote up here from Gordon Glegg. Scientists can discover a new star, but cannot make one. Would have to have an engineer to do it. Anyone know Gordon Glegg? He's very famous. Mr. and Mrs. Glegg's son. I tried to look him up, didn't find anything valuable, but it was a cool thing. Core skills. These are some core skills I think you need to have. Again, argue with me. I'm happy to talk more about them and add new slides. You need multiple skill set, patterns, languages, different architectures. You've got to be able to think about things, especially if you work for the Virginia Department of Data Governance. A lot of different technologies, so they need people not afraid to go look at different platforms, different technologies, different tools in order to get things done. Do you need all of them? I would argue no. Find the best ones that work for you for your use cases. But something to argue. Understand platform technologies, cloud, big data, orchestration. How do you move and orchestrate data in your enterprise? You know, it also applies on-prem too, but you have to really understand these technologies. Google Cloud, Azure, and AWS. Distributed systems, microservices, APIs, compute, Python, Scala. These are all just things you really need to be thinking about if you want to be a true data engineer. These are technologies that are emerging, changing, and maturing very, very fast. You gotta know data sciencey things. You gotta speak the language. I can, but you gotta know data sciencey things. You gotta understand there's libraries, there's Python, there's Scala, ways they can get things done. They may be challenged because they're thinking about solving this problem a certain way. You're like, hey, so have you seen this package or seen that? You know, you should be able to just really partner with your business, especially your data scientists, and really help them accomplish things. So you gotta be able to speak their language. Do they have to know you speak your language? It's great if they do. We have a business user who's really, really smart in Azure, and he does a really good job. Agile DevOps Understanding. Anyone read what's the name of the book? Can't remember the name of the book.
Phoenix Project.
Huh?
Phoenix Project?
The Phoenix Project. Well, that's a new book. Right. The Phoenix Project.
Unicorn.
The Unicorn. That's the other one. Yeah. There's lots of good books out there. Hey, I want to be 100% automated, 100% DevOps, 100%. Those are goals. Set those goals. Work on that work. Work on the backlog of things that don't make your work efficient. Has anyone worked on something that's completely efficient day one? Michael, I'll shake your head. There's many years things just don't work out of the box. But be willing to say, hey, I did this, but I didn't do these things. Backlog those things so that you can come back to them, or somebody else can come back to us. Strive for making sure you can 100% automated testing, automated deployment, everything through code. Ability to learn and adapt changes. Again, you're going to hear this constantly from you. Gotta learn, gotta adapt, gotta be able to change. We're both highly effective teams. So lots of people are moving at different paces. Everyone on the team has different speeds and different ways they work, different characteristics of that stuff. Learn how to leverage who those people are on your team. Everyone's going to be different. Everyone's going to think differently. People are going to show power differently. People just learn differently, but learn how they do that. I love this. I'm not a big fan of Elon Musk. I think he's a little crazy, but I can either watch it happen or be part of it. I always want to be part of it. That's why I like the role I'm in, because you can be part of it and actually deliver things. So if you want to be a data engineer, want to be part of it and work on it. If you're not doing things that you are really truly happy about, explore, find other opportunities to do that. Be passionate about what you're doing with data engineering. Questions in the past couple slides? I want to kind of go fast. We're going to do 7. DevOps, automation, and agile. Team-enabled delivery, agile. Please. This is fantastic. It's worked out very, very well for us on our journey at CarMax. It's been about a year and a half, and it's worked very, very well for us. 2-week sprints, just really think about how to do agile, be able to backlog things you didn't do, mistakes you made, put them on cards, get somebody to work on them, or you work on them. Just got to be able to really work on that. Data engineers work out the details. These are high-level features in each sprint. So you really got to think about, hey, what features or what am I trying to deliver in this sprint? Plan out your sprints. Get backlog things that you want to do. Data engineering, you really got to step up, think about how I want to get things accomplished. Bring in tech deck, new features during your sprints. You got to do this. We do this. We have automation Fridays every other Fridays, and we have tech deck every other Friday, alternate. And you just got to do this. You're going to accumulate tech deck. Anyone who doesn't have any tech deck? Anybody? Everyone has tech deck. Be willing to bring those in. Be willing to plan those into your sprints, into your norms. You've got to do it. Otherwise, you will never address that tech deck. Ability to refactor pipelines and operations efficiently. You're going to have pipelines and things out there that have been running. We've got some stuff that's been running for months. And we're just like, wow, you know what, this is just not operational enough. You know, is there a way we can do more work or more features to that so we can just kind of step away and just tell us when it's not working? Everyone has that stuff. You've got to be able to work on that stuff, be able to refactor even your own pipelines. Or, hey, you know what, David, come over and look at the pipeline that so-and-so wrote. Can you rewrite it? Can you think about it differently? We've got some new folks join our team. They thought about doing things different. That's the big deal. Just think about it. Understand what the business use case is, and the technology use case. And can you change it? Great. Absolutely. Let's do that. Learn and fail quickly. Adapt. Big thing. Again, learning again and fail quickly. I'm really good at failing. I one time or another, I deleted a whole entire QA department, QA resource group by myself.
And then he found out it really wasn't QA data in there.
There was prod data in there. But you know, you've got to be able to learn what they're supposed to do. So I learned what not to do on that, and that is I shouldn't be coding and deleting things. I don't always learn my lesson, but when I do, it's always the hard way. But I think it goes a long way. If you're willing to say, hey, I screwed up, I messed up, and did that in front of your peers, it goes a long way, because when you learned a lesson, everyone's like, oh, wow, he actually is a decent person, and he can fall on the sword for us. It's a big deal. Data engineering lessons learned. Today I'm just not going to cover all the following, but we're going to talk about storage platforms, data acquisition, not indigestion, data delivery and availability. Really, just the kind of things, I could talk about this forever. We've got some really cool lessons learned. We learned this stuff, but really a lot of this is more about just kind of best practices, things to think about when you're doing stuff around storage, data acquisition, ingestion, not indigestion, data delivery and availability. Define what you know, be prepared to iterate and redefine. Legacy data lakes. Not sure how I cover these, but really I put that in because it was my thought, what do I talk about? Lots of companies put up data lakes, lots of companies say, hey, we got a data lake, yay. Try and deliver on it. I went to a conference, spoke at Spark AI last April. Lots of people and lots of big, giant companies that make chicken sandwiches, they're struggling to define or deliver value on their data lake. And they're proud, hey, we got a data lake, they're proud of it. But you've got to enable and deliver value from your data lake, and choosing a data lake as a storage platform. You've got to do it day one. You've got to figure out how am I going to deliver value by ingesting that data, investing that time, how to do that. Stay in your lane. Really your zone, your area, or your space, however you want to look at it. You really got to figure out, you really got to define your zones. Pick a nomenclature, be clear, and use it. But also be willing to pivot. Examples, raw, valid, refined zones. Anyone use raw, valid, refined, or heard about those? Bronze, silver, gold. Lots of other companies kind of talk about Databricks, talk about using those zones. I'm all about raw, curated, consumption, and exploration. Just interesting. Have zones, define your rules, why things reside in each one, and how things mature and move through those zones from your data lake or your storage platform that you choose. Recent technology changes have also forced us to pivot. We had a philosophical debate on this. Data lakes were always meant to be immutable. You read any books, they were published older than a year ago or older than 6 months ago. You put data lake, you don't change it, you don't update it, you don't do anything to it. Leave it, let it sit. But it's no longer valid, which is interesting because it's a play on a valid zone. Now there's technologies out there like Delta. You can update your data very, very fast, very, very efficiently by creating tables, updating schema, update the data, and you can keep track of that. Technology is changing. The other big thing on this is you have to change too. Don't think just because, hey, this is the way we looked at it a year ago, we made this decision. Technology is changing very, very fast, especially around data engineering, especially around data science. There's lots of cool things that are emerging. And this whole thing on changing and updating the data lake was a debate. It was a very good debate, and we collaborated as a team to figure that out. Anybody catch the fourth zone? Anyone knows what exploration's for? Okay. Sandbox. Data science. Your application data may sit there. The application data may move to consumption. It really depends what you want to do. There really is no hard and fast rule. There's lots of really good articles, a lot of really good recent Gartner articles on this stuff. I encourage you to read and learn. Questions on storage platforms? I'll answer any questions. Data acquisition, acquire and organize. I think Carl's really hit on this. We are. Got to catalog your data. You got to know what you're bringing in. Got to know what you're using it for. Know the reasons why you have those columns and column names. You've got to create an ingestion framework and tools. You got to figure out how am I going to do this? How can I do this effectively? Are you creating a pipeline for each data set you're bringing in from each system? No. See if you can create a framework that helps you ingest things better out of your data warehouse or other source systems you may be ingesting. Data catalog. It's a must. Understand what's coming and get organized. Find ones that have rich APIs around them to allow customizations. A lot of these catalogs, there's some really cool tools out there that are really, really expensive, and there's some really cool tools out there that are really cheap. So you've got to kind of fit and pick what you want to figure out, and you're probably going to define and design some APIs to use it to kind of really fit your need as you move data through your zones for your business rules. Metadata-driven investment framework. This is interesting. Carlos, is Carlos still here? Did he leave? He's here?
He's hanging out.
I don't know if we partnered on this or not. I mean, metadata-driven investment framework. Got to understand your data, got to understand how to ingest it. Data drives our lineage as the data moves through your data lake or your storage platform. You've got to define it. You've got to define your rules. Keep your zones aligned, raw, valid, and refined. I should have used my new terms that I want to use up there, but Sorry about that. Orchestration. You got to figure out or find something that helps you orchestrate. There's a lot of data. It's going to move at different speeds. Batch, nightly, hourly, real time, streaming, anything. There's lots of cool tools out there, NiFi, Data Factory, AWS pipelines, that really help you accomplish this. And a lot of these tools are semi-code free or very code free. Lots of JSON stuff, you got to figure out how to do your DevOps around that. That's always challenging, but you got to find a tool that helps you do that stuff. Apply your business and platform rules for zone maturity. As your data sits in these zones, you're going to have to be able to change and morph why something's in raw, why something moves to valid, why something moves to refine. You've got to be able to willing to change that stuff. While you may set those rules in stone in these zone names, be willing to pivot, negotiate, and talk about why they're all sitting in different zones and why they may be going together. Make repeatable pipelines and processes. You should be able to do that. Know about streaming, low latency, caching, and have the right use case for streaming. Low latency type stuff and caching. You got to understand stuff. We don't have something yet, but I'm really interested in finding a use case that really helps us deliver that value. Could we go do it? Yeah. We did it in POCs. We did some quick POCs on it, but really not a need yet for instance. Inbound, outbound data is at different speeds. I talked about velocity. Data is going to come in differently. Data is going to be wanting to consume differently. Are you standing up the right kind of services, APIs, dropping in a blob storage, streaming it somewhere else that can process that? It's the stuff you got to figure out. Embrace multiple technologies and capabilities. Key 10, reporting tools, Tableau, RVADE, and others can be leveraged. I think Carlos was using all of them. Push data, relational databases. You're going to have to go use case for relational databases. You're going to have legacy reports, and things are going to have to still stay in a relational database. There's nothing wrong with that. But figure out better ways to leverage that relational database to continue to use and support legacy use cases or current or new BI use cases. It still exists. There's really nothing better than a relational database. It's fast. APIs, microservices, reduce dependencies, loosely couple things. If you can peel away things or services or part of the stuff that you're designing, look and use API or microservices to really wrap that stuff and separate those things, to keep things separate, loosely coupled. Low latency data storage. There's some really cool stuff up there. Dynamo, Cosmos, MongoDB. Sean, you're welcome. Cassandra. Learning curves are steep in some of these. There's gets and puts for all those different databases and different use cases. Some are very, very easy to use. Some you got to stand up and do a little more work on them, but they're all emerging. They're all really pushing the envelope. A lot of them have databases and services. One thing I really talk about here is PaaS and SaaS services. I think we can talk about architectures and later talk about that. Streaming, Kafka, Service Bus. Find the right use cases for that stuff. Hey, I'm streaming in my data. It's great. Great, you need it. Streaming. No, I'm running a bunch of processes, take 3 or 4 hours, and someone looks at it once a day. Cool. But you spend a lot of time doing that. Or you peel out some good technologies and you learn something. Still cool. Kubernetes model support is really something I really want to push the team to look towards as you're standing up data science models. Kubernetes is a service on AKS. Don't know what it's called in AWS. Maybe someone does. But really cool services like spin up containers, let your models and data and services of your applications run, spins down, manage. You're not managing VMs. You're not managing a bunch of crazy stuff. That stuff's really cool. Really great for data science enablement and model lifecycle management. So really cool stuff that's out there now. And Azure is really pushing it. They made some good announcements a couple weeks ago at their Ignite conference, I think it was. So there's some cool videos on this today, which I shared with our team. Compute. You really got to think about, okay, I've got all this data. How do I jump through hoops, do aggregations, summarizations, and do large moves of that data? You got to use compute, EC2, Spark, VMs. Pick what's right for your use case. Spark, someone told me from a vendor that sells data warehouse software that Spark was going away. Spark's been around for, I don't know, anyone know how many years Spark's been around? 5 years? 7 years. It's not going away. And actually, if you look at Azure, AWS, they are all enabling services that make data science or doing kinds of things easier for everybody. They're creating click, point, and drag technologies. Azure Synapse, really, really cool, created a lot of buzz on stuff. It's got some cool potential features, and it utilizes Spark. They're doing Spark against Cosmos. Mongo, I think you guys are probably doing Spark against Mongo as well. Spark at your service as well. It's a great way. It's an in-memory massively parallel processing engine. It's fantastic. It's very, very fast. But the learning curve on learning that, Scala, PySpark, you got to pick up those languages. But if you can, great. But companies like Microsoft, they got .NET for Spark now. So if you still want to write your .NET apps and jump through some magical data hoops on Spark, you can't beat it. I mean, companies are making it, AWS, Microsoft are making it very easy for you to use these technologies. Security, got to include the security slide. Anyone in security here? Oh, we can skip these. Go. It's a necessary evil. You got to plan, not planning, to think about management and data controls. Management controls. You got to talk about identity and access management around your resources, your settings, your properties of the resources. Whether it's on-prem resources, AWS, Azure, Google Cloud, you really got to think about how am I going to control the management plane and how I manage those resources. Data controls. Identity and access management around data access. Zones, read, write, update, delete. Who has what access to what data, when, and in what role. You really got to think about that in the cloud. It's very, very important. Controls and process around your dev and QA product process. We love to think these things could be different today, these days. I think they all still exist. We all kind of want to think about how do I do dev, how do I do QA, make sure all the plumbing works, and how do I roll things out to product. I would hope these kind of just change, but all still exist. So that's all stuff you got to think about. Ensure you have controls and checks on how your data flows on your platforms, especially in the cloud these days. You really just got to make sure controls. There's one thing I think we've been talking about lately on the team is how do we understand what data we're moving from what zones. We kind of did it, got all the data moving. It's like, okay, is it the right amount of data? Is it the same data that's moving from refined and valid? You got to really think about how you manage that and kind of understand, am I moving that data? Am I doing aggregation, summarization? Is it right? Is it not right? Last but not least, data engineering. It's frustrating and forgiving. The journey to become a data engineer is not as easy as it might seem. It's unforgiving, frustrating, and you have to be ready for this. Some of the journeys you want to throw the towel in. I encourage you to learn. Pretty cool graph by this Lexi. Can't remember his name. Anybody know him? I think his parents do. I don't know. Just really cool. Just trying to figure out, is there some kind of cool graph that kind of talks about learning curves, writing scripts, and automating. But again, about data engineering, it's about learning and understanding new technologies and not being afraid. Don't be afraid to learn. Don't be afraid to fail. Don't be afraid to win. I covered it really, really fast. It's 7 o'clock. That's a lot of fast talking. I'm from Detroit, so I talk fast sometimes. So I'll take any kind of questions you guys have for me.
Sorry, I'm not from a data engineering background, I'm a data analyst, and I don't know anything about the zones. Could you just give like a very high level explanation of what the zones are? I'm sure that I deal with them, I'm not aware of them.
So like a raw zone, like in a daily storage, but raw is kind of it's where you're landing the data as it comes from the source.
Okay.
The purpose of raw is it's immutable. You're probably not ever going to change it.
Okay.
It's historical. It's backup. You're landing that data. It's raw form. Valid, you're going to do some validations. You do some ETL. You do some translations. You may reformat dates or times differently. You may do some light translations on fields for whatever reason. It's really up to you to decide. Document it. Everybody agree on it. And move forward.
Thank you so much, I appreciate that.
That's my question. But what process does a company or organization agree and then disseminate that agreement on when things move from different zones?
So we were fortunate. We're starting up our first thing about a year and a half ago. It was really about just getting agreement with some of the high-level architects and management people, are some of the key stakeholders, our business stakeholders, and our data stakeholders, making sure they understood what we were defining in the zones. Here's what we're going to go after with these zones. It'll change. When it changes, we're going to make sure we communicate that. It sounds easy, but it was a pretty big meeting in a large conference room. Everyone had questions after. So we had to come back around and make sure we answered all the questions.
Questions. What do you use at CarMax for data process orchestration?
Orchestration, Azure Data Factory, and we also use Databricks.
Cool.
Databricks.
Cool. Second question. Which podcast do you listen to learn how much
Big Data Machine, I got that from Brandon. Machine Learning 101, it hasn't been republished, it was only published in 2016 and 2017, but the guy did a great job baselining what data science is, AI, and machine learning. still very valid. I encourage you to listen to it. Also listen to a Mac Power users. I'm a big how do you work? So I listened to a couple lawyers talk about how they do their workflow.
What format of files you are using in the valid and prepaid? What are the format of files? Parquet, that.
Parquet, bro.
So raw and prepaid both.
Pardon?
In raw and prepaid, in both the zones you are using Parquet.
Raw, I think raw is just the raw format. But I was after that's Parquet.
Valid and prepaid Parquet.
If you can't use the Azure Data Catalog, what would you use?
Excel. There's a pretty good job. The open source project Apache Arrow, I think Azure's next iteration is based as an Arrow, Brandon?
Atlas.
Airflow?
Atlas.
Atlas, that's it, Atlas. They're basing on that. I think that's pretty cool. I think, but there's, I think we had one of our managers went out to the Tableau conference and came back with just about everybody's doing a data catalog now. So I just Googled Informatica. Tableau's got a data catalog, which I was shocked. Or Tableau/Salesforce now, I guess. But I think just about everyone's out there. When I was doing my consulting, my prior history, talking to customers with Teradata, yes, I was a Teradata person, but we also talked about ecosystems, everything living together. There was not one customer that said, hey, I really did data cataloging well. It's worked out so well. It's great. I want to talk about it. Has ever seen anybody stand up and talk about the data catalog? Other than maybe Carlos. They're powerful, but like you're swallowing a giant elephant with them sometimes because you're going to go buy like Lation's got one Informatica. It's a giant elephant. Tons of features. Your data management governance folks, we like it because of this. Your data engineers, we like it because of this. But it never did the same. I would love to find if someone's got the tool that's going to work. Maybe Mongo has one shown.
I think it's tied back to your first point about a POC. Try something that's inexpensive that you can learn what it is you really are looking for before you go buy some behemoth.
Azure catalog, data catalog is great. I wish they would mature it more. Waiting for the next version someday. It's $5 per person per month. Not bad. We turn it off, we're done. So again, it's a PaaS service. I think I could probably talk about PaaS versus SaaS versus DBaaS versus IaaS. I will for another gen topic we can talk about in December.
Any automated data cataloging tools you've come across? Other people.
Yeah, data engineers. Yeah, I think some of them advertise. They got some of the discoverability. We're talking to one, Rob. I can't remember. Matt Golub had. What's the name of that company?
I will remember it as soon as I start driving away from here.
They had some discoverability on that stuff, but you still have a governance process by which you got to go in and accept and understand that stuff.
Irwin and ER Studio have tools like that where you can reverse engineer and ingest, but you're still sort of managing it.
Yeah, and you still got to go through and then
Yeah.
govern it and say, okay,
And govern
yes,
it,
this makes
exactly.
sense, or we catalog
It's
this.
safe enough
And you
to
don't
know.
want to catalog everything. If you are, find that job and go do that for the next 30 years.
Yeah.
Catalog everything in someone's enterprise. Someone probably maybe love for pay for it. Denoda, yeah. Pretty cool tools and some discoverability. I think a lot of that discoverability, it's not, I would love us to be able to adjust our catalog when schema changes. We have a schema change issue today. If it's, dropping of columns, we'd love to be able to auto adjust and say, hey, let's update this and still ingest the data, not hold back the pipeline ingesting that data. Because now we have to go through, okay, hey, these two columns are missing. Are you okay with this missing, Mr. Data Scientist? Now, I'd love for you to intelligently just do it.
Yeah.
And we just get an alert, hey, I changed the schema, have a nice day. Good question. Anybody else?
You did mention a couple of tools there, MyFi, and you were talking about Spark, right? So you guys are using any tools that kind of generate Spark, or you prefer encoding?
Yeah, data engineers generate Spark code. That's a fun one. There's really no cool tools that do that. I think now lots of these companies, Databricks, Cosmos, they are creating GUIs, so like Visual Code, Databricks and Databricks Connect, and not doing a sales job, but they got some pretty cool stuff that helps you kind of code ahead and understand how to do that stuff a lot more efficiently. I imagine folks like Azure Synapse, there's my Outlook, love my Outlook. It's closed, I don't know why it's telling that.
Talent.
Yeah, talent, I mean, they do that stuff, it's interesting, but
Generate Spark code.
Anybody who's using like that topological data analysis, like a Yahoo, tools, data quality.
I think our data governance probably cool, probably does a lot of great work. Carlos, you got anything like that?
Or,
Like YASD, like, you know, auto curation?
no, we're still trying to figure out who the right people are to do the right stuff. Yeah, so going back to what he was commenting, I mean, you know, Elation is another one of those data catalogs that does a lot of that mining for you. The problem is that, you know, a lot of those tools require quite a bit of investment to learn, and then you end up learning the tool and not the principles and the concepts. And that's what we're trying to reinforce with the simple tools, is really focus on the principles, why it is we're doing what we're doing, why is it so important to do the documentation and curation, and then let later on evolve and mature into that right tool set for the organization. But starting with a tool that may not be right fit is a recipe for disaster.
Thank you. Any other questions?
If you were talking to an organization that had, production, reporting, data warehouses and so forth, and they wanted to build a data catalog, how long and how many people would you tell?
I would say it's impossible. But I would say find your high value data sources that you want the catalog to add the most value to your business users. Bring the business in to help you figure out how to do that catalog your higher value items. Don't try and swallow the elephant, that's hard. Ingestion, but find the right data sources that add value. Don't just go catalog everything, just catalog everything, just catalog. We chose to catalog things we're bringing into our data lake because they were going into models that we just use.
Yeah, thank you.
Do you document your ETL processes, and what do you use for that?
They are documented in Azure Data Factory. So do we have good documentation to say here's what they're doing and some of the business logic around them? No, it's an interesting concept. My boss who's in the background is probably saying, we probably need to do that. I'm hoping he's not. I go, but it's an interesting concept. I'm not sure of the value other than someone new coming to the team, but it's pretty easy to figure out if you're using tools that really visualize your flow, your data, your pipelines and stuff like that. And I'm not sure the documentation is absolutely 100% critical. I'll put my card table up and you can argue with me. Fair question. Yeah, we can wrap up. Thanks, everybody.
Last quick plug, if you don't mind. I'm from EPON. We're hiring data engineers. I hear this is data meetup. I'm pretty sure that CarMax is also hiring because we keep talking about it. So maybe other people here are hiring. I don't mind if you guys shout out too. But if you are looking for a job change or whatever, reach out to CarMax, reach out to us, or anybody else that maybe want to put in their plug.
Also, we have a Slack channel. It's posted on the meetup, the invite for it. So if anybody wants to join that, I did create a channel for jobs. So if anybody wants to post job openings or if you're looking for a job, you can use
for internships, things like that.
Yeah.
Right, so guys, awesome event. Thank you to our two presenters. Big round of applause. I saw that do not distribute on the bottom of your presentation, but any leg room for Richmond?
Redact everything and then distribute.
I'm not a government agency, so I don't have to report everything I say. I will figure out a way to share.
Cool. Well, thank you for the blockbuster presentations tonight. So, just like some more announcements, the data science meetup is happening tomorrow night. So, it's kind of nice that we're all in sync. You know, data engineering Tuesday, data science Wednesday, and then let's see, we have some upcoming events, some ideas. Brandon's giving a talk on Kubernetes, possibly in January.
No, he is.
Yeah.
Not probably, yes.
Julia, any other ones?
We're also looking for early springtime, maybe to do a panel for folks who are graduating from their undergraduate and graduate programs who want to kind of move into the data engineering space. We want to kind of bring up a representative panel of speakers who can kind of help guide you through the job searching process, what skills do you need, things like that. So we're going to work on that probably either in March, April timeframe.
Like David said, try to sign up for the Slack. We'll we'll share it on our meetups, and it's up here too. So we're just hitting one of us up on like, I guess, meetup, yeah. A group of us are going to Tang and Biscuit after this at like 7:30 when we unofficially get kicked out, so keep that in mind. And then the last part, these guys, Epon and CarMax touched on it earlier, is that I wanted to open up like a sort of forum at the end, just real quick. If anyone has announcements, if they're hiring, if someone's looking for a job, great time to say like and announce it to the whole group, because then that'll be good for like facilitating right into the closing networking. So, I know CarMax.
Don't be afraid.
Yeah,
Everyone's hiring and everyone's looking.
All go at once.
I have an announcement for anyone who's on the analytics side of things or sort of more downstream. We're having a data modernization meetup at Snagjob on Thursday with Snowflake, which is a cloud-based data platform, or database.
And that's on Meetup, right?
It is on Meetup.
Cool. Can you share the link to that on the Slack for this one?
Sure.
Okay, thank you so much.
Also, Joe, I think they touched on it too, please, content and subject matters, if you want to come up and show code, I think we would love, I mean, kind of underneath the smart folks that started this up, but just any content, if you want to share code, we can really get geeky if you want to share code. Here's what I'm doing with data engineering. Here's how I wrote this pipeline that did this, and actually jumped into groups and whatnot. Please, we want to have that presented here, because I'm sure some folks will want to see some code. Not everyone wants to see PowerPoints. Is Ryan. So.
Yeah,
If you're
awesome.
Yeah, sorry. If you're thinking about moving to Alexandria, my company, the Molly Fool, we have data engineers that we're hiring for. If you're wondering what the heck am I doing in Richmond, come talk to me.
You guys write those cool articles about companies in there.
And retirement and stuff. Well, great. Thank you all for coming. Another round of applause for Carlos and Tom.